things that we're going to be discussing and showing you with the new release that will be going out as soon as we finish this webinar. It'll be posted out on the website. The emails that you received for the reminder for this webinar indicated we'd asked you to download the release notice version 5.6.218. If you hadn't downloaded it up to this point, you're going to find it's no longer there. It's been replaced by a new version, 5.6.219. We found something this morning that we had to fix, and we've republished the release notice. It is out on the website. You can download it. It's almost identical to the 5.6.218 that you can kind of page through that I'm going to be using as my guideline for today's webinar. So if you have a copy of that, feel free to use that to scribble down notes. The other thing before we get started I want to say is anyone that's participating in this, if you're an IT type person or a manager, please do share any of the new features with your staff members. I'm sure you will, especially when it comes to anything that's related to setup, things that you might need to consider before updating the latest release. So make sure you're sharing everything that happens during this session with the parties in different departments that may be affected by any changes to the software or new enhancements that are rolling out. Okay, so we have made changes to the application or enhancements in just about every module of the software with the exception of accounts payable. There's changes to AR, client management, inventory, job management, Sedona schedule, and Sedona setup. And there's a couple new reports that are rolling out. Didn't make it into the release notice, so we'll be doing an addendum to that. They're not new reports, but changes to existing reports. So we'll try and get that out to you as soon as we can. Okay, so I'm going to move right along to the release notice. We're going to start with the EFT change in accounts receivable. This new change affects mainly customers that are dealing with more than one merchant bank account if you're processing automatic payment transactions through Forte. So what I want to show you is under accounts receivable, in the EFT processing form, we've added a new column in the display here, a merchant ID column. And this is to facilitate when you're uploading or downloading batches so that it's easier to find which transactions went against which merchant ID account, so it's much easier to reconcile your bank account. So when you update to version 5.6.219, you want to make sure before you do that update that if you have any pending EFT transactions that you have not submitted, get those all done first before you do that, because there's a couple setup changes that you're going to have to do before you submit your first batch after updating. So this EFT processing form I can sort on this merchant ID. I have 2 transactions up here that are going to one merchant bank. The remainder are going to a different one. So the way this works is when you get ready to submit a batch, when you click the upload, if you have more than one merchant ID account, it'll ask you which one are you using so that it sends those to the right batch. Okay. You can also filter on a particular branch to say which one you want to do, and it'll show you which merchant bank it's attached to. So the way that the application knows which merchant ID to use, depending on which branch you select, we made a change to Sedona Setup in the branch setup table where you're actually linking which merchant ID account goes with which branch. So customers that are currently using Forte and have a merchant ID set up, one or more, behind the scenes, we're automatically attaching all of your branches to your default or your very first merchant ID bank account. So anyone that's going to be submitting transactions after the update, you need to go into your setup first and make those changes and make sure you're linking the correct merchant ID account to the correct branch. If you only deal with one merchant bank, the application, when you do the update, will automatically link your merchant ID to your branch, but you should just go and double check and make sure that the linking occurred correctly. Okay, so on the branch setup table, which is I'm going to drop down to that to show you the setup, where you're going to find that. I'm in my branch setup table in Sedona Setup. So when you click on branches, you click on your branch, there is a new field here with a merchant ID. So if you have more than one, you would select the correct merchant ID that goes along with that particular branch. So you can have a different one for each branch if that's how you're doing business with Forte. So again, if you're only dealing with one merchant bank, just go in there and double check before you submit your first batch of transactions. So the next time that you run cycle billing or set up a single invoice EFT transaction, it will tag the merchant ID that goes along with that branch. So it will display in your EFT processing window here. Okay, so that was a nice feature that we did. Okay, if you're following along in the release notice, I'm on page 5. We're going to be talking about a change that was made in regards to EFT processing about hold dates and when do we process an EFT transaction for auto pays that are submitted by cycle invoice batches. So I'm going to open up this one customer that I have set up a credit card, and I'll just show you a field that has been added to the EFT setup form. So this is for both credit cards and for customer banks as well. We have added this new field that says days past invoice date. The hold date field is still there. But how this is designed to work is when you post a cycle invoice batch, you can put in what is the date that you want to be able to process those EFT transactions, the earliest date. What this function will do is if there's a value of more than 0 in here, when we post that cycle invoice, we'll look at the invoice date that you post on those cycle invoices and add X number of days to that to say when can we process that EFT transaction. So if we were generating our cycle invoices for July today, we might not want to take those payments until 15 days later into the month of July. So this field, it's not required. It's if you want to process your data that way. Using this as a criteria when you're posting cycle invoices, that's fine. If you don't want to use that, you leave it set to 0, and we will still continue to use the whole days that exist there on your EFT setups. So you have the option of doing either or. If you do use the days past invoice date, this will override whatever the whole day is up here on the EFT setup. So again, it's on both for ACH banks, and it is set up for credit cards as well. Okay. Back to that. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention one more thing. Okay, so if you want to be able to process your EFT transactions immediately, if you were to put a -1 in that field, which it does allow a negative value, it means that as soon as you post those cycle invoices, it means you can process those EFT transactions immediately today. Okay, moving along. Okay, so I am flipping over to page 7 of the release notice to introduce a new feature that was added. I think this was a customer request. Up at the top, that you're going to notice when you update to version 2.19, there's 2 blue buttons up at the top. And the purpose of these is to advance to the next customer number or the previous customer number. So if you just want to scroll through your list of customer numbers till you get to the next one you want to work with, if you're doing something where you're touching consecutive customers, you can do that. So you can go forward or backwards on the list. So this next customer and previous customer, this only works if your customer numbers are set up with actual numbers for the customer number. So if your company has alphanumeric characters in the customer number, it does not work with that. It has to be an actual number for it to advance forward or backwards. So that's a nice feature. Okay, moving on to a major feature that's rolling out that's brand new. Many of you, I'm sure, will be able to take advantage of this new functionality. And what it is called is customer part price lists. So on a customer record, you are able to assign a particular price list that a customer will be using whenever you sell parts to that particular customer, whether it's on jobs or if it's on service tickets or if it's on a miscellaneous invoice. So where that information is set up is on the customer record. If you do a right click and you go into Edit Customer Setup, you're going to find a new field down here underneath the No Collections, Part Pricing Level. So there is a choice of either none or price level 1 through 5. The price level names, these are hard-coded, so you can't go in there and change them to some other words. Currently, that's the way they are. So it's price level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. When we do deliver the database to you, everyone is set to none. So if you decide that you want to use that, you would have to change it. If you decide that you're going to be doing some global changes behind the scenes, we can have support work with you to write some scripts to populate that field if you need to in the future. You'll have to reserve time with support to be able to have us help you with that. But where is this pricing information coming from? It's coming from part setup, which we'll get to in a minute. But when you update to this version, you're able to set what we call a default part pricing level. So if once you set up part price levels, if that's what you decide to do, when you create a brand new customer, you can have a price level default in each time you create a new customer. And that new flag is under the data entry defaults for client management, and it's right down here at the bottom. So if you say that price level 1 is the default for all new customers that we create, or 2, 3, 4, 5, or none could be it. So when we deliver the application to you and you update, the default is set to none. So you'd have to change it to something else if it's a different pricing level that you want to use for your parts. And that could be changed at any time. But it is global for all customers. It's not branch specific. Okay, so I'm going to jump forward to page 11 to show you where the part pricing is set up, and then I'll come back to another feature that's on the customer. So on your parts in inventory, in your parts setup, there's been some buttons added, and I'm going to go into some part numbers that I set up for testing here. So if you go into edit mode on a part, down near the bottom, your sales and service pricing, there is a little button here to the right of the price. This actually is the same form that gets launched no matter where you click on the button. So if you decide that you're going to be using customer price levels, that part price will be the same for service or sales or miscellaneous invoices. It would no longer be a different part price depending on whether it's service or sales. So that may make your decision on whether you can use this feature or not. So if we want to set up our part price levels, we can click on either button. It's going to take us to the same place. And this will set up where you can set up what is the part pricing structure for level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So the way that you can configure this to calculate what the sales price is going to be for each price level, it could be constructed of two elements, a base price and labor on top of that if you choose to do so. So when if a person is set up for price level 1, for example, and we put a part on a service ticket, the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to go look at the customer record to see are they set for a price level or on their customer setup. If they are, then we'll come and look just at that part to see if there is a price level set up for it. So if I did not set up a price level for that particular part or device, then we would default back to whatever the normal business rules are on the part setup so that we actually get a part price. It would never be 0. So what you can set up the part price is this first field here is the price. It's kind of like considered a base part price. In addition to that, you can add labor. So you can say, in addition to $21 base, I want to add 1 hour of labor at $21 per unit. So the way this is set up, this part would sell for $42 for that device. So you can choose to use just the base pricing and no labor, or the base price and labor, or just labor. I mean, you can do whatever you want here to come up with the end result that you're trying to get to. When you update to the latest version, there's nothing that's populated on any of the pricing levels, any dollar amount. So this would be something that you would have to establish on your own. If you do need help with this, if we can do this electronically, we'd be glad to help. We can reserve some time, and we can get probably one of our support folks to help you out with this. Okay. So again, if a customer is set up with a pricing level and the part does not have any amounts entered into the actual pricing setup for that customer's price list, we will default back to whatever is for the sales price or for the service pricing. If a customer does have a part price level linked to it, the part pricing level structure will override any other business rules for service. So if you have service level set up where you're doing a calculation based on whether they're residential or commercial for a markup, the customer price level will override any other business rules for calculations of part pricing. So that will always take the precedence. So these part price levels, they are effective all over the application. So it's sales, which means those on jobs, service, which is on your service or inspection tickets, and miscellaneous invoices as well. It will honor that part price list. Okay, I'm going to flip back one page to talk about another feature that was added in client management to the customer setup. Okay, on the customer information, if you go into edit the customer setup, you're going to notice there is a new tab at the top of the customer setup. It is called Alternate Part Descriptions. And what this was designed for is if you want to sell a part to a customer and the part number that you actually want to print or the description, you want it to be different than what the actual part number is in your inventory, this is a way that you can then select to add a part and give it a different part code or a part number and a different description that would automatically default from your inventory part setup when you sell that device. So you could add as many different parts in here as you want to your alternate part descriptions. Currently, this is not printing on any of our standard invoice formats. That's still pending a development change. So you could go ahead and set them up, but actually there's nowhere this is going to print on any of our invoice formats. If you did have one of these parts on an invoice, it is not going to show this information in the body of the invoice itself on the invoice lines for that part. This part of the application is still being worked on from a development standpoint. This was a feature that was paid for a customer that's coming on board shortly. So just keep your eye on the release notices in the future. There will probably be additional changes to this for more customers to be able to use it. Okay, I am flipping over to page 13 of the release notice. We're jumping into inventory. A significant change was made to transfers, part transfers. And what has now changed is when you select transfers from the inventory menu, it used to be this is where you could do a bulk transfer to transfer parts from one warehouse to another, either a branch warehouse to another branch warehouse, or you're replenishing truck stock. This has now changed functionality totally. So when you click on transfers, this has now become a feature called transfer requests. So what the transfer requests are designed for primarily is if you're doing inter-branch transfers and you're actually physically shipping parts from one branch office to another, this is a way to track those parts as to when the part request was put in for the transfer, when somebody started packaging it to send it out the door, and when the part's actually shipped to the other branch location. It also has a feature in here of the destination warehouse of actually receiving those parts into their warehouse. So during the process of the transfer request, no parts come out of the inventory of the originating warehouse. So I can say I'm requesting parts to be sent to another branch. We tag them to go, but until the destination warehouse receives them, they still stay in the originating branch's warehouse. So the way this works, I've set up a transfer here. I'm just going to double click on it to show you. I'm transferring parts from one branch warehouse to another, from my Michigan main warehouse to my Ohio main warehouse for stock. And the date it was requested was on the 13th. It was in process on the 13th. So in process kind of means that I'm working on packaging that order, getting it ready to go. As soon as someone has confirmed that they've actually shipped the parts, they would put in a ship date. And then if you open up a Parts Explorer on that part, it will show that there are parts in transit, but they are still, from a dollars standpoint, still sitting in my Michigan warehouse until my Ohio warehouse actually has them received on their dock, and then they will do a receive transaction, which I'll show you in just a minute. Okay, a transfer request can still be done if you're just replenishing truck stock. the steps are a little bit different in building that transfer request, so the process has changed a bit. So if I were transferring parts from my main Michigan warehouse and I'm stocking a truck, say that I have a truck that needs some batteries, and I could just put truck stock. And I'll go down here and select what parts. So let's put in a battery here. And let's say I'm transferring 5 batteries to that truck. Okay, and you can add multiple parts just as you would if you were just doing a regular parts transfer, a bulk transfer. Okay, so when you finish adding all your parts to the list, you would click Save and Receive, which would save this as a request and transfer or do the receive to the destination warehouse as well. And this will bring up a little receipt form. It's the date that we're actually making the transfer on or receiving them into the other warehouse. And it is finished. Okay, so when the destination warehouse, my Ohio main warehouse, when they actually receive that shipment in, they could come in here and say receive. And if they did not receive the entire shipment, maybe it was multiple packages, you can do a partial. So if I receive the first line item but not the second, you can change the received quantity and it leaves the transfer request open until the rest of them are received, and it can be done on a separate receipt. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and receive all of these. Okay, so any transfers that had been done prior to updating to 5.6.219, those will be considered what we called closed transfer requests. So if you look at this button down here at the bottom, it says include closed. There's going to be a long history here because that's the way we had to label all the prior transactions. Since transfer requests did not exist prior to this version, we considered them closed transfer requests, so they'll be marked as such. And again, you can always look up a previous one. Okay. Now, one of the things that we also have is what is called a status of each transfer request. I'm going to do another one real quick here to show you how the status changes. And let's say it's going there. Okay, so when you initially create a transfer request, I guess I need a part, sorry about that. All right, there's a status showing here. So when you open up the transfer request list here, it shows it's going to be one of 3 statuses. It's either requested, means we've set it up, but no one's done anything with it. So this would go to a warehouse manager, hopefully, that's going to be monitoring this. And then the process, the in-process date is when he starts getting it ready to go, if it's actually going out the door, shipping, or prepping the shipment. So it could be today. And the status will change to in process. Okay, if it were really physically shipping to an outside location, the date shipped, however you sent them out, UPS or whatever shipping method, then the status changes to shipped. And then once it's received, it drops off the list. So it's a nice feature. If we go in and take a look at the Parts Explorer, we've added some new fields to show you that information of parts that are in transit. Let's go back into my transfers. So this one is shipped. So this was part number IM1240 that we had in there. So if we go to our Parts Explorer and look at part number IM1240, you're going to see some information that is new. Okay, so what we have that is over on the right here, we have pending XTFR in, pending XTFR out. So this pending transfers in or out of the warehouse. So this is my Michigan main warehouse. I have 25 parts pending a transfer out. So once that transfer request has been received, and then this clears out, and the parts are actually physically transferred from one warehouse to another. If you open up the warehouse a tree here, expand a little bit farther, again, we've added 2 separate menu options here to split up the open and the closed transfers. So this is transfers that are pending, and these are the ones that are completed. Okay, and we've also shown those same fields. If you were to open up a warehouse in Explorer View, you're also able to see that information of those pending transfers. So here's my Michigan main warehouse. Again, we have open transfers, this one that's waiting to be received, and then all of our closed ones. Okay. Next feature that I'd like to discuss is, sorry, flipping through my pages. Okay, so it's related to job management and some integration into Sedona Schedule as well. I just jumped over to page 21 if you're following along with me. So we added this really cool feature, and this was something that was added for a new customer coming on board, but I think everyone is going to be able to use this new thing that we've added in. And this is to help make scheduling easier for the person who's actually booking appointments for jobs. So currently, you could go into a job and look at it and kind of determine when does that appointment need to be scheduled for. Then you have to jump over into Sedona Service and remember what you're scheduling and when. And there was a lot of back and forth. So this hopefully is going to make that process a little bit easier. So let's take a look at this job here, job number 384. And if you go to the job task list, we have added some new fields here when you're looking at the job tasks itself. There's a new schedule date column, there's a last tech, and there's a last dispatch date and time. And so the way that this works is there's a new field, data entry field, so when you're entering a job task or in the job task setup, you can put in a schedule date. This is a date that should be scheduled for when we want that work to be done. So I've set up a schedule date for my pre-wire, and I've also set up a schedule date for the actual installation of the parts. Once we've scheduled an appointment, it'll show the last tech's name of who's scheduled, and once that appointment's been dispatched, we would show the last technician or installer that was on that job. So if you have a job that is going on for a very long period of time and there's multiple appointments that have been scheduled and dispatched, this will always show the last technician's name and the last appointment that was completed for that job. Okay, so I have this job is requiring two separate appointments, one to do my pre-wire on the 19th and then to do the actual install the devices on the 20th. So if I jump over to Sedona Schedule, and I'll launch it right now. And if you click on the Open Jobs list, we have added a new button here, this little check mark here. So when you click on that, and the reason it's showing is because I was there, that was the last thing I did, this is kind of a queue of the jobs that need to be scheduled. So this gives me the job number, the customer number, that's the customer we're just working with. And so for however many tasks that have a scheduled date in that scheduled date field, it'll show up in here until you actually do the scheduling of that appointment and then you approve that job task that it's been completed. So this first one here on the 19th, I need to schedule my pre-wire. That's for tomorrow. So if I double click on that, I can go ahead and get this scheduled. Go into pre-wire. And I'm going to do it on the 19th, and I'm not going to be there at midnight. That's a little too early. Yes, I'm going to start at 8:30 in the morning, and I'm going to go there till 12:30. And I'm going to use Mr. Mark Taylor, and I'm not going to use Mr. Mark Taylor. Let's go to Madison. Remove. All right, so we scheduled the pre-wire. So if we go back over to the job and look at the job task list. So if we've completed this scheduling task, right-click, approve, apply, and then if you come back into Sedona Schedule, I have my refresh on, that would have dropped immediately. So now that pre-wire scheduling task is dropped off. Now I just need to schedule the actual installed devices. So this can show you however far out into the future you want to look or back. You can say I want to see how many weeks back that I need to schedule or how many weeks into the future. So you can kind of see what's coming up that you need to get scheduled to kind of get an idea of what the workload's going to be. So you can just move up and down with these arrows, how far out you want to go into the future or in the past. Okay, so what triggers it dropping off the list here is when you approve the task that the scheduling's been done for that same task name. Okay, so that's a nice feature. Should make things much easier for people that are doing the actual scheduling. Okay, within jobs as well, we've added a new option button in your job notes. So if we go down to Tools, where Notes live, click on Notes, there is a new function button. No, wrong job, sorry. Let me go to a job that has Notes. Okay, go to Tools, go to Notes. Okay, so I have two notes here. So currently, if you wanted to read all these notes, you would have to click on each one, and especially if it was a very long note, it might take some time trying to see everything that's been attached to the job from our notes entry. So we added this new button at the bottom called List. So we can click on that. This is a scrolling list of every note that's been attached to that job so far. So it just puts everything in one place. If I had many more notes here, there would be a scroll bar here that you can scroll up and down through the list and read all the notes without having to open each individual one and read it. So that was a very nice feature that was added. Okay. The same feature has also been added to service tickets on the list button. So if you go to a service ticket, you'll be able to see that same information. I'm going to go over to service. That was further back in my book. Ticket 3192. I've got several notes in this one. Okay, so you click on Notes. Again, if you have multiple notes here, click on your List button. Again, it gives you the same all notes in one location feature here. All right, while we are in Sedona Schedule, we're going to talk about a new feature. It actually slipped out with a build a couple months ago, and a couple people clicked on it by mistake and didn't know what they were doing. But this is going to explain to you now what the functionality was, because it really wasn't completely finished when it kind of sneaked out accidentally from a development build. But this new feature is called Add to Next Cycle or Build to Next Cycle. So the way this works is for the system that's on this service ticket or inspection ticket, if this particular system has recurring lines that are billable in a month beyond the current month, so it won't do it if you have billable lines in the current month, this will show you when the next cycle date for that particular customer is. So this button over here is available. It says Add to Next Cycle. So what this would do is if we clicked on that button, instead of saying Create Invoice, it will put the charges, every single line item that would have been on this invoice, into a table and sit in a pending status until we run the next cycle billing process. When I do my cycle billing for July, the charges on this service ticket will be included on that cycle invoice. So if you do not want to do that, this button is securable if you don't want people to accidentally click on that, and we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to the permissions changes. So if you decide you don't want to use that, you can still continue to just create invoices as normal. If you don't want people to use this feature at all, turn off that, or don't grant permission to that button to anyone. Okay. All right. Okay, we added a new security option at a customer's request, which was to secure the ticket comments field, which is right here. So this new permission, what it will allow, if a person is not granted the permission to customer or ticket comments, they're able to enter information into the comments field when you're initially creating a ticket. As soon as you press the Save button, if they don't have the permission to have access to that field, it will lock down and this whole field will be dimmed out that you can't make any changes to this front page here. So again, that's one of those permissions you want to think about when you update to this version. Just a heads up, that permission is turned off for all user groups. So what that means is if you update to 2.19, you're going to find that everyone will not be able to go in there and edit comments after the ticket is saved. So you want to make sure that's something that you turn on for the people that you do want to give that permission to. And we kind of found that out for ourselves at SedonaOffice. We updated to the version late last week, and we found that out right away. Okay, also another change or enhancement that's been made to Sedona's schedule is in the ticket queue. We have added 3 more fields to the field chooser that you're able to display. And those 3 new fields are the customer branch, the site branch, and the panel type. So when we made a change a few builds back, how we filter the queue or what we're displaying here, it is no longer dependent on the display group. It basically shows everything. And we had a lot of people not happy with that. So this way you're able to filter on a particular branch, either the site branch or the customer branch, to get that service ticket queue into a manageable list that each branch office can manage on their own. So they're here. I've got mine displayed here. So when you click on the little field chooser button, they've been added here. So there's your customer branch. The site branch is further down along with the panel type. Okay, Sedona setup. A couple changes were made to Sedona setup, some enhancements, some new setup tables. And I'm going to jump to page 28 of the release notice. In the service company setup table, we made a change to your service providers. There's some additional fields that are available if you want to use this. I'm going to scroll down to my service company setup. Okay, so when you open up your service companies and then check the box that says include vendors, this will include your service providers, your subcontractors that you use for service. So I'm going to click on the first one at the top here, ABC Service Provider. This is my test case. If it is a service provider, not your internal service companies, a new tab is going to be displayed here called Subcontractor. These are all optional fields if you want to use them. Currently, there are no hooks for billing or calculating charges. At this point, it's all information only for you. Eventually, there'll be some more changes as this piece of functionality develops by the customer that's paying for this feature. At this first page here, you have a hire date when you hired that sub, how you normally pay them, payment priority, that's a special feature a customer wanted, and there's going to be some default other item codes that eventually there'll be ties into the service ticket when that service provider is used on a service ticket, and default charges. There are also 3 additional buttons on here to collect additional information. So when you click on insurance, these are all hard-coded: automobile insurance, liability, and workers' comp. So if the box is checked, it means you have that on file, and when does that expire? And obviously, through the back end, you could probably design reports off of this. Okay. The second button is licenses. These are free-form text fields. The labels are hard-coded just as license 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can type whatever you want in there. And I believe these are 50 characters long. So it's just free-form text, whatever your policy is, how you want to use each license if they're needed. And then the last button, again, these are just some free-form text fields. The labels are hard-coded for the customer that paid for this development item. So the travel area, the travel distance, travel info, turnaround time. These are all 50 characters long, just a text field. You can type whatever you want in there as long as it doesn't exceed that character limitation. Okay, so where do you see this information? You actually can see it on a ticket if it's assigned to a service provider. So I do have a ticket set up that's assigned to ABC Service Provider. That's my ticket 3171. Okay, so this one, my service company is ABC Service Provider. If I just hover over that field, any information that was on that subcontractor tab or any of those buttons will display. And again, you need to read fast. So right now, at least you're able to see the information. There's no other functionality tied to that yet that actually does something with that information, but you can see it on the screen, which is good information. Okay, another new setup table that ties into the notes on your service or inspection tickets. There's a new button down here that is labeled instructions. And what this was designed for is you can set up in a new setup table called instruction notes a list of canned phrases that are typical words that you want to put into a service ticket that you don't have to keep typing over and over again each time you create a new ticket. So if you click on the instructions button here, you would get a drop-down list of all your special instruction codes here. And they could be whatever you want. So you could have special instructions every time you go out and do a CCTV repair or a fire alarm or an access control. It could be standard things when you go out to a commercial account that you have to bring or wear safety equipment, things like that that you just don't want to have to retype. So whatever applies to that particular ticket, you could come in here and just add that particular note. If it's smoke detector repair, and save. That way I don't have to retype it, but it is part of my notes. Okay, so where do you set these up? We have a new setup table in Sedona Setup, and it is in your service grouping of setup tables called Instruction Notes. So it's basically text information. The actual label for the field is 50 characters. The text itself can be up to 1,024. So this gives you quite a bit of space to type in some very detailed information that you want to put into the service ticket notes that could be printable or not printable. All right, so I would recommend, since you might have quite a long list of different types of notes, you might want to have some preceders so that you know if it's for intrusion or fire or camera or access or something else. So it's easier to find what you're looking for on that list instead of sorting alphabetically and trying to find what you want. Maybe a number or a character code, so you know which type of codes are for specific system types, if that's how they would be applicable. Okay, it's a very nice feature. Okay, user group security. We've added 3 new security options in the service area of the software. So if we go into our user group setup, I'll go into my administrator and scroll down to our service setup defaults or permissions. The last 3 at the bottom, export ticket queue, edit customer comments, and build ticket to cycle. So the edit customer comments I talked about earlier, that if this is turned on, you'll have full access to the comments field on the front page of the ticket. If this is turned off, a user will be able to enter a comment into that box when they're initially creating a ticket. Once the ticket's saved, it'll lock down that field. You can't make any changes to it. So if you do not want to restrict your users to modify that field ever, make sure that's turned on for the user groups that need that. The build ticket to cycle that we talked about earlier, you can restrict who has access to that button. So if it's turned off, that button will just be dimmed out. They won't have access to use that feature. So think carefully about that. The export ticket queue. We had a customer ask us to secure the exporting of your service ticket queue. So we added functionality a couple builds ago where you actually could export the service ticket queue. So if we click on the queue up here, we added this button, I think it was 215, maybe earlier. We've had people wanting us to secure that only certain users can actually click on that button and export whatever is in the ticket queue. So that's what that new permission secures, where someone can do it or not do it. So if it's turned off, that button will be dimmed out. They won't be able to export the ticket queue. All right, so again, administrators, system administrators, your IT folks, make sure that when you update to 2.19, you have a plan in place to give people the appropriate permissions that they need. Okay, one thing I want to mention too that was not incorporated into a prior release note that you may have stumbled on or may not have stumbled on, I want to give a better explanation for it. In your service setup defaults, and this is not in the release notes, but I'm going to incorporate them into a new version, a later version. We put in a new field a little while ago, probably maybe almost a year, note access level. And this is your default note access level. So when you're entering a new note on a ticket, it will default to a level 2 or it'll default to a level 1, whatever you pick as your default. Well, also tied to that is another option. So not only does it default what level the note is when you're entering a new note, it also controls what level of notes will print on a printed service ticket. So if my note access level is set to a 2, that means when I get ready to print service tickets, hard copies, it's going to print all level 1 and level 2 notes. And that's the current functionality. It does not affect your Sedona Web customers. So those of you that are using Sedona Web, that is still only restricted to level 1 notes. That's all they can see when they log in from Sedona Web. This is just for internal and for printing on tickets. So I kind of had a little bit of a problem with that, and Donna and I had a discussion this morning. So what we're going to add, probably in the next, maybe the next build after this one, is when you get ready to print a ticket, if you're selecting that you do want to print the field notes, there is going to be a selector to say which level do you want to print, only 1s, or if you select 2, that means it'll be 2 and 1 level notes that you do want to print. So if it's something you don't want your customer to see though on your level 2 notes, this will give you a little bit more control over what actually gets printed on the paper. So for those of you that saw level 2 notes printing on your service tickets, that's why, because your note access level default is set to a level 2. All right, I'm talking too long here. All right, one more thing I want to talk about that really isn't a feature, a new development item. It's actually on your release notice. It's showing up in the application correction section, and it's on the very last page. And it's something I want to bring to your attention that used to be in the software many, many moons ago, but we revived this feature, and this is regarding inventory. So if you're doing inventory control, you're tracking a perpetual inventory in SedonaOffice, if you had, there's 3 flag settings in your inventory setup to determine what will happen if you try to do a transaction that would cause your inventory to go negative. What do we want to do? Either not allow it, present a warning message to the user, or allow it without any warning message. So we have several customers that have that option set to do not allow, but historically we have always allowed inventory to go negative on service tickets. And the only reason for that is it's usually a timing issue, that a transfer was not done on a timely basis, moving parts from a main warehouse to a technician's vehicle by the time someone put them on the ticket, which would cause your inventory to be negative temporarily, and then it would catch up once all the transfers were completed. But what this will do is if you have your setting to do not allow and you try to put a part on a ticket where there is not enough stock in that warehouse, it won't let you do it at all. It will stop you. You'll get a warning message as shown in on the documentation, and it won't even add the part to the ticket. If your option says a warning message, it will give you a warning message that there isn't enough stock, but it will still allow you to put that part on the ticket, just to let you know it will go negative if you don't do something about it. So just be aware of that. So anyone that has the do not allow flag setting, it could restrict your business flow. But we think it's better for those people that want to make sure that you're never going to go negative. That's going to stop you dead in your tracks. Okay, Michael, I'm done.
Well, you're not
quite
done. You deserve a bow, because that was very good, Carolyn. But you're not quite done, because I do have a lot of questions, and we only have about 10 minutes. We'll try to get as many of these as we can in. And as you answer them, if you could just open up the form so people can see it, because some of these will go back. So I'm going to try to go through these as quick as I can. The first question is, you mentioned on the EFT processing, if I have any future transactions that I need to process those. But what if they're not scheduled for another month? I can't process them. What's going to happen to those transactions?
Just make sure you have your branches linked. We're going to have to talk to Don about that to link the future transactions, because it's actually hooking it to the merchant ID. We'll have to talk to him about that. Maybe we have to write a script for that. I'm not sure. That's a Don question.
Okay. Okay, so if you could follow up on that.
Yes.
What happens if I have submitted transactions, but they haven't posted it? I'm still waiting for the response, mostly like an ACH transaction, because those could take a couple of days sometimes.
Yeah, those are still going to be processed. Yeah, they'll process the same way they always did. We're just more concerned about uploading future batches attached to the right merchant account.
Okay. Now, if I only have one merchant ID, do I have to select a branch when I actually do my upload, or can I just select everything at once?
You can select everything unless you want to separate your branches by batch for whatever reason, but you don't have to.
But you don't have to. What
No.
happens if I have multiple and I want to just do them all together? Can I do that, or do I have to do those by branch?
Well, you're selecting by merchant ID basically, so if you don't select a branch, it's going to have everything in that batch if it's only one merchant ID.
So you want to make sure you select by branch at that point?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. What is the maximum number of days for the days past the invoice date that I could put in there?
It's unlimited. You could put 1,000 if you want to. I don't think that's what you would want to do, but
okay. Okay. And this is a question that I actually going to ask myself. You said if I put -1 in there, that will always force the EFT date to be the date I run the cycle?
it means that those transactions are available for processing immediately as soon as you post the batch.
So that would be the day I run the cycle, meaning immediately.
The day you post the invoices.
The day I post it. Okay, very good. And so we're only going to use one or the other. You would either use the days past invoice date or the hold date. So if there's a days past invoice date, that will override the hold date. The hold date becomes really not applicable at that point. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. With Sedona Web, could a customer, when signing up, they really can't use the days past invoice date. That's not available for them. That's correct.
As far as I know, no. Yeah, that's internal.
Okay. When you use the customer scroll button, and my first time seeing it, I really like that. Does it automatically close the customer you're on as you scroll from one to the next?
Yeah, if you look down there. So if I were to minimize this, it really hasn't opened those customers. It's just advancing it. So you're not stacking up 500 customers if you click that 500 times. It's just opening the last customer that you clicked on.
So it's technically closing the one you're in and opening up the next one.
Yep, opening and closing.
Okay, great. Let's see. I'm trying to go through these as quick as I can. On the part level, and I guess this is the part level pricing, can you apply it to a master account and have it applied to all of its sub-accounts?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm going to have to ask Don.
Okay, we'll find out on that one.
I'm thinking probably no, but I'll find out.
Okay. And so it looks like right now the part description is set up customer by customer. Would that be correct?
That is correct.
Okay. On the transfer request, if we want to do an immediate transfer, can you just review what button you press so I don't have to do the request date and everything?
Well, you still have, yeah, you don't have to put the in-process or ship date. If you're doing it right now, all you have to do is once you've added your parts, you hit the save and receive, yes, and save, and you're done.
So that's the way it would work, just like it did previously.
Yes, I think it's one more mouse click than it used to be, but everything has to process through the request, even if you're doing it right now.
And is the user ID and date being tracked every time they press the request date in progress, date received, closed, so we know what user's actually doing each one of those steps?
I can find out.
Okay.
One thing I do want to mention real quick too, for people that don't want to use part or transfer requests, you can still go in and do a part transfer part by part, so without having to do a request. So if I'm transferring some batteries to another vehicle or out of wherever, when you use the transfers at the part level or on the warehouse level, if you come in here and do a right click, add a transfer, this still operates the same. It doesn't go through the request process. It's just when you're using it from the inventory menu over here that it is a transfer request.
And the transfer request does use the material handler security settings, correct?
Yes.
From just like anything else.
Just like anything else, right?
Okay. is the on-hand new reflect the transfer out quantity?
The on-hand new, the parts stay in the from warehouse until someone receives it, and then they move out. Once the receive is done, then they move out of the from warehouse into the to. So if there's something in the pending here, we're not moving anything out of the source warehouse until somebody actually receives it. They'll always be in the source warehouse until someone's received it, then they move. Okay. So no GL happens until someone receives it.
Okay, good. Does the notes list include all notes types within a job, or will it only be screened out to the security level that I have as a user? So
it's
for example,
by
user.
If I'm
okay.
Right. Well, you wouldn't be able to see any other notes. So if I was a level 1 person and there were level 2 notes in there, I wouldn't even know they existed.
Right.
Because they would be filtered out.
Okay. This really wasn't something you covered, but someone asked, do the notes print on the job ticket?
I believe notes already do print on the job ticket.
Yeah, I think so,
if you select that option, yes.
Okay, and I assume these job notes roll to the notes in the main account. Yes.
Into the job, yes.
Yes, you can see the job notes there. Okay, let's go through a few more. To do the bill, the invoice to the next cycle invoice. And I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyways. Will the total amount be subject to the EFT charges if the customer was set up for auto pay? So not only will it do the regular recurring, but would it also charge for those additional service charges on that as well?
That would be correct, because they become a part of that cycle invoice. So yes, they would be included.
Okay. The canned responses that we did for service tickets, those notes, those are only for service tickets now, correct? Are those available for jobs?
The instructions? Yes, that's just for service right now.
Right. Okay, and a last question, I believe. With the part level pricing, will that allow us to print a part list that has price per part that we would be charging the customer?
There are no reports yet that I know of.
Right.
I'm sure there may be in the future. And of course, you can eventually, we've talked to Matt about adding those new fields to the part query builder. They're not there yet, but I'm sure that will be an addition, because it's a table sitting out there.
Okay. Well, we kept everyone 1 minute over. I want to thank everyone again for joining us. Carolyn, thank you for a wonderful presentation. That was fantastic. And again, we will have this webinar posted on our website hopefully by tomorrow. And if you, again, if you have any questions, please send them to support. And then all the other questions, I did skip some of them. It just was hard to make out everything. We will respond to everybody and get answers to those. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Hope to see you in Nashville next week.